The boy's name was Jamal. He was only 14, but life had already tested him more than many grown men. Every morning, as the sun slowly rose and the city streets began to buzz with footsteps and traffic, Jamal opened his eyes to the hard wooden bench in the park that he called his bed. He had no soft blanket, no pillow, and no alarm clock. The chilly air or the rays of the sun touching his face were the only things that told him it was time to wake up. He sat up slowly, rubbing his tired eyes, and looked around at the world that seemed to move so fast while he was left behind. People in clean suits hurried past with coffee cups in hand. Children in fresh school uniforms laughed and ran, their backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. Jamal watched them with a quiet longing. He, too, once had mornings like that, with a small backpack and neatly folded clothes his mother used to prepare for him. But those days were gone, lost like a dream that slipped away when morning came. Jamal had lost his mother 2 years earlier. She had been the strongest person he knew, gentle, hard-working, and always smiling even when life was tough. She worked in a diner, standing for hours just to make enough to buy food for them both. She often came home tired, but she never complained. She used to tell Jamal, "No matter what happens, son, always be kind. The world needs kindness more than anything else." He carried those words in his heart like a secret treasure. When his mother became sick, Jamal did not fully understand what was happening. She grew weaker day by day, and no amount of medicine seemed to help. One evening, she squeezed his hand tightly and whispered, "You are strong, Jamal. Promise me you'll never give up." That night was the last time he saw her smile. After she was gone, Jamal's father disappeared. He had not been much present even before, but now he was completely gone. Jamal was left alone. For a few months, he tried to live with relatives, but they were struggling too, and one by one they turned him away. Finally, Jamal found himself on the streets, carrying only a small bag with 2 worn-out shirts and his mother's old scarf. He often wrapped the scarf around himself at night, pretending she was still near, keeping him warm. Life on the streets was cruel, but Jamal refused to let it turn his heart cold. He visited soup kitchens whenever he could, standing in long lines with other people who had no homes. Sometimes kind strangers gave him leftover sandwiches. Other days, he went hungry. Yet, he never begged. His pride kept him standing tall even when his stomach growled painfully. He earned a few coins here and there by helping people carry their bags or cleaning car windows at traffic lights. Every cent felt like a victory, even if it was not enough. Despite his struggles, Jamal had a gentle soul. Once, on a freezing night, he saw a stray puppy shivering near the trash bins. Without thinking twice, Jamal took off his thin jacket and wrapped it around the little animal. He hugged the puppy close, whispering, "Don't worry, you're not alone." The puppy wagged its tail weakly, and Jamal smiled. He had very little, but what he had, his kindness, he shared freely. But Jamal's nights were the hardest. Lying under the open sky, he often thought about his mother. He wondered if she could see him from above. Did she know he was trying to be strong? Sometimes he whispered to the stars, "I'm doing my best, Mama." Then, he closed his eyes tightly to stop the tears from falling. Far away from Jamal's world of struggle, another family lived in comfort and wealth. Richard Collins was a respected businessman known for his grand house, luxury cars, and powerful connections. He had worked tirelessly to build his empire, and many people admired him. Yet, despite his success, Richard's greatest joy was not in his business but in his family. His wife, Emily, was expecting their first child, and he often told his friends that no business deal could ever compare to the happiness of becoming a father. Richard and Emily lived in a large home where every room was filled with warmth and beauty. Emily decorated the nursery with soft pastel colors, tiny clothes, and toys neatly arranged in baskets. She often walked around the room, gently placing her hand on her stomach, smiling at the thought of holding her baby soon. Their lives and Jamal's life could not have been more different. On one side of the city, there was laughter, warmth, and security. On the other, there was hunger, loneliness, and survival. Neither family knew the other existed. Yet destiny, like an invisible thread, was slowly weaving their paths together. Jamal's days continued much the same. He wandered the streets, watching the lives of others, often imagining what it would feel like to belong somewhere again. He passed by schools where children raised their hands eagerly in class. He stood outside restaurants where families shared meals together, their laughter spilling out through the doors. These sights were bittersweet, painful because he missed them, yet beautiful because they reminded him of hope. One evening, as the sky turned orange and purple with the setting sun, Jamal sat quietly on the curb, his mother's scarf around his neck. He noticed a young boy with his father, holding hands and laughing. The father bought the boy an ice cream cone, carefully wiping his son's face when it dripped. Jamal watched, smiling softly. He wasn't jealous, he was happy that at least someone had what he had once known. Deep down, though, he prayed that one day he might feel that warmth again. Sometimes people passed by Jamal without even noticing him. Others glanced at him with pity or suspicion. But there were also a few who smiled, and those smiles mattered. They reminded Jamal that he was still human, still worthy of kindness. At night, as he lay on the park bench with the stars shining above, Jamal closed his eyes and dreamed. He dreamed of going back to school, of sitting in a classroom with books and pencils, of raising his hand to answer questions. He dreamed of having a small home, maybe not big or fancy, but filled with love. And he dreamed of hearing someone say, "Welcome home, Jamal." He didn't know it yet, but the dreams he held so tightly were about to come closer than he ever imagined. His life was about to change in a way that even his young heart could not predict. For in another part of the city, Emily Collins was preparing for her baby, unaware that very soon, her path would cross with Jamal's. And in that crossing, both of their lives and Richard's too would be transformed forever. That evening was quiet, the kind of evening when the city slowed down just a little. Street lights began to glow one after another, shining golden light on the sidewalks. People hurried home, carrying shopping bags, while others waited for buses or taxis. Among all this movement, Emily Collins sat in her car, humming softly to herself as she drove. She had just visited a friend and was now on her way back home to Richard. Her heart was light. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach as she drove, smiling at the thought of her unborn child. She whispered softly, "We'll be home soon, little one. Daddy must be waiting." Emily was in her 8th month, and though she sometimes felt tired, her excitement about becoming a mother was stronger than any discomfort. But just as she turned onto a quieter road, she felt the car shake. A strange sound came from under the hood, and within seconds, the car slowed and came to a complete stop. Emily frowned and tried to restart it, but the engine refused. She sighed and looked around. The street was nearly empty, with only a few people walking in the distance. She reached for her phone, but before she could call Richard, a sharp pain shot through her stomach. She gasped, her hand gripping the steering wheel tightly. The pain was unfamiliar, stronger than the usual kicks and cramps she had been feeling. Her heart began to race. "No, not now," she whispered nervously. "It's too early." Emily pushed open the car door and stepped out slowly, holding her stomach. The night air felt cool, but sweat formed on her forehead. She tried to take a few deep breaths, reminding herself to stay calm. She knew stress could make things worse, but her body was trembling. Just then, she noticed 2 men at the corner of the street. They were not dressed neatly, and the way they looked at her made her uneasy. Her mind, already clouded by the sudden pain, grew even more anxious. She held her stomach tighter and tried to step back toward the car. At that exact moment, another figure noticed her from across the street. It was Jamal. He had been sitting near a closed shop, holding a small paper cup with the coins he had earned that day. His scarf, the one that belonged to his mother, was wrapped tightly around his neck as protection against the cold. Jamal had seen many people walk past him without care, but when his eyes fell on Emily, he noticed something different. She looked pale, her hands clutching her stomach, and her steps were unsteady. Something inside him told him she needed help. He quickly stood up and walked closer. His clothes were worn, his shoes torn, but his heart was steady. "Ma'am," he called softly, not wanting to frighten her. "Are you okay?" Emily turned, surprised to see the young boy. At first, she wasn't sure what to think. His appearance showed he had little, maybe nothing, but the concern in his eyes was clear. I think something's wrong," she said breathlessly. Before Jamal could respond, another wave of pain struck her. She cried out softly, holding her stomach tighter. Jamal's heart pounded. He had no experience with pregnancy, no idea what to do, but he knew he couldn't just stand there. "Please, sit down," Jamal said quickly, rushing to guide her toward the curb so she wouldn't collapse. He placed his hand gently under her arm, helping her lower herself carefully. Emily looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. "I think, the baby might be coming," she whispered. Jamal's young mind raced. He looked around desperately for someone to help. That's when he noticed the two men from earlier coming closer. Their eyes were fixed on Emily, and Jamal's instincts told him that their intentions weren't good. His chest tightened, but he refused to let fear control him. Standing protectively in front of Emily, Jamal lifted his chin. He might have been just a small, homeless boy, but in that moment, he felt as though he had the strength of someone much older. "She needs help," he said firmly. "Don't come closer." The men exchanged glances, perhaps surprised at the courage in his voice. After a tense moment, they shook their heads and walked away, muttering something under their breath. Jamal let out a quiet sigh of relief, but he didn't show it. He wanted Emily to feel safe, not worried. Turning back to her, he knelt beside her. "It's okay, ma'am. I'll get help." He quickly scanned the street and spotted a woman walking by with her phone in hand. Without hesitation, Jamal ran toward her. "Please," he said, his voice urgent but polite. "Can you call an ambulance? She's going to have her baby." The woman, seeing the panic in his eyes, looked across the street and noticed Emily sitting on the curb, clearly in pain. She immediately dialed the emergency number. "Don't worry, help is on the way," she assured him. Jamal rushed back to Emily, kneeling beside her once more. "They're coming, ma'am. Just breathe, okay? Just keep breathing." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She was scared, but this stranger was the only one beside her now. His voice was calm, steady, almost like a lifeline in the middle of her storm. She held his hand tightly, her knuckles pale from the pressure. "Thank you," she whispered. Jamal nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "You'll be fine. You're not alone." Minutes felt like hours. Emily groaned as the pain came in waves, her breathing uneven. Jamal kept talking to her, telling her small stories to distract her. He spoke about the puppy he once helped, about the stars he watched every night, about how his mother used to say the world always had a little light even in the darkest times. His words, though simple, gave Emily comfort. She closed her eyes and listened, imagining the boy's mother, imagining the stars above her, and slowly finding strength in his presence. Finally, the sound of sirens filled the street. Bright lights appeared, and the ambulance stopped beside them. Two paramedics rushed out with a stretcher. They carefully lifted Emily and placed her inside the ambulance. One of them turned to Jamal. "Are you with her?" Jamal hesitated, then shook his head. "No. I just helped her." The paramedic gave him a long look, almost surprised. "Well, you did the right thing, kid." Emily, now lying inside the ambulance, looked at Jamal with tears in her eyes. She reached out her hand weakly. "Don't go," she whispered. Jamal stepped closer, holding her hand one last time. "You'll be okay," he said softly. "Help is here now." Before the doors closed, Emily whispered again, her voice trembling but filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jamal." The ambulance drove off into the night, its sirens fading into the distance. Jamal stood there, watching until it disappeared from view. His heart was still racing, his hands still trembling, but a strange warmth filled him. For the first time in a long while, he felt that he mattered, that he had been in the right place at the right time for a reason. He pulled his scarf tighter around his neck and looked up at the stars. "I did what you taught me, Mama," he whispered. "I was kind." Little did he know, that single act of courage and compassion had just changed the course of his life forever. Richard Collins had just finished a late business meeting when his phone rang. It was a call that made his heart stop. The hospital number flashed across the screen, and within seconds he picked it up, his voice tense. "Mr. Collins," a calm voice asked. "Yes, this is Richard." "What's wrong? Is it my wife?" His words rushed out, fear gripping him. "Sir, your wife was brought in a short while ago. She's safe, but she went into early labor. She's being taken care of right now. Please come as soon as you can." Richard didn't even reply properly. He grabbed his coat and ran out of the building. His driver barely had time to start the car before Richard urged him, "To the hospital. Quickly." His heart pounded harder with every passing second. Emily, his beloved wife, the woman who filled his life with laughter and warmth, was in trouble. And their child, his first child, was fighting to enter the world too soon. When Richard arrived at the hospital, he rushed through the wide glass doors. His mind was full of fear, but when he finally saw Emily lying on the bed, pale but safe, tears filled his eyes. He hurried to her side, holding her hand. "Emily! I'm here," he whispered, his voice breaking. Emily smiled faintly, exhausted but comforted by his presence. "Richard, we're okay. The baby, we're okay because of him." "Because of who?" Richard asked, confused. He looked around the room but saw no one else he recognized. Emily's eyes softened as she recalled the boy who had stayed by her side. "A boy, just a boy, maybe 14 or 15. He helped me on the street when the car broke down. He stayed until the ambulance came. Richard, if it weren't for him, I don't know what would have happened." Richard listened, his heart aching as he imagined his wife out there, alone and frightened, with no one but a stranger to lean on. But what struck him most was her tone. She spoke about the boy with such gratitude, almost reverence. Later, when the doctors reassured Richard that Emily and the baby were stable, he sat quietly in the waiting room, thinking about the boy. Who was he? Why was a child wandering the streets at night? And why had he shown such courage when many adults might have walked away? The answer came sooner than Richard expected. A nurse who had been on duty that evening mentioned that the boy hadn't gone with them in the ambulance. He had stayed behind on the street, quietly disappearing into the night. Something inside Richard stirred. He could not let it end there. He owed his wife's safety and perhaps even his child's life to that boy. He asked the nurse, "Did anyone get his name?" "Yes," she replied thoughtfully. "Your wife mentioned it. Jamal. That was the name. Jamal." The name stayed in Richard's mind like a song he couldn't forget. The following day, when Emily was resting peacefully, Richard couldn't sit still. He felt an urgent need to find the boy. With the help of one of his drivers and a few questions around the area where Emily's car had broken down, Richard finally received a clue: a small homeless boy, often seen near the park and the closed shops. That evening, Richard went to the park himself. His expensive suit and polished shoes seemed out of place on the cracked sidewalks, but he didn't care. He scanned the benches and corners until his eyes fell on a thin figure curled up under a worn scarf. It was Jamal. Richard approached slowly. The boy stirred, sitting up when he noticed someone standing nearby. His eyes were cautious but not unfriendly. "Are you Jamal?" Richard asked gently. Jamal nodded hesitantly. "Yes." "Who are you?" Richard took a breath, his voice thick with emotion. "My name is Richard Collins. My wife, Emily, you helped her last night. Do you remember?" The moment Emily's name was spoken, recognition lit Jamal's eyes. "Yes." "She was in pain. I stayed until the ambulance came." Is she okay?" Richard's throat tightened at the boy's first question. Not about himself, not about a reward, but about Emily. "She's safe," Richard said softly. "Because of you. Both she and our baby are safe because you didn't leave her alone." Jamal lowered his gaze, almost shy. I just did what I could. My mama always told me to help people." Richard felt something shift inside him. Here was a boy who had nothing, no home, no comfort, not even proper clothes, and yet his heart was richer than most people Richard had ever known. He crouched down so he was at eye level with Jamal. "Son," Richard said, his voice trembling, "I can't thank you enough. If not for you, I might have lost everything I love. Please, let me do something for you. Anything. Tell me what you want." Jamal blinked, startled by the offer. His thin fingers clutched his mother's scarf, the only piece of family he still had. He thought for a long moment before answering, his voice quiet but steady. "I don't want money," he said slowly. I just want a chance. I want to go to school again. I want to work, to earn something honest. I don't want to live on the street forever. I just want a life where I can be someone my mama would be proud of." Richard's eyes filled with tears. He had expected the boy to ask for food, clothes, or even money. But instead, Jamal asked only for dignity, for opportunity, for the chance to rise. For a moment, Richard could not speak. His throat was too tight, his chest too full. Finally, he placed a hand gently on Jamal's shoulder. "You have no idea how much your words mean to me," he whispered. "You've already made me cry, son. And not out of sadness, out of gratitude and respect." Jamal looked down, embarrassed, but Richard could see the quiet hope shining in his eyes. That night, Richard made a promise in his heart. He would not let this boy remain on the streets. He would give him the chance he had asked for. Jamal had saved his wife and his unborn child, now it was Richard's turn to save Jamal's future. As Richard walked back to his car, he looked up at the night sky. For the first time in years, he felt humbled, reminded that wealth was not measured by money or possessions, but by the goodness of one's heart. And in that lesson, a homeless boy had been his teacher. The morning after Richard met Jamal, he woke up with a feeling he hadn't known in years. It was not the rush of closing a big business deal or the pride of signing a contract worth millions. It was something deeper, something that touched his heart. He could not stop thinking about the boy. Jamal's quiet eyes, his humility, and his wish for nothing more than a chance at life kept echoing in Richard's mind. At breakfast, Emily noticed her husband's silence. She poured him a cup of coffee and smiled. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" Richard nodded slowly. "Yes. Jamal. I can't get over what he said. He didn't want money, Emily. He didn't even ask for food. He only asked for a chance to work, to go to school." Richard's voice grew softer. "It broke me, because I realized how much we take for granted." Emily's eyes grew warm. "Then let's give him that chance, Richard. You always said family means everything. Maybe this boy is meant to be part of our story." Those words gave Richard the strength to act. That very day, he arranged for Jamal to be brought to their home. One of his drivers went to the park where Jamal usually stayed and gently invited him. Jamal was nervous, clutching his scarf tightly as he sat in the back of the car. He had never been to a mansion, never even dreamed of stepping inside such a place. When they arrived, the tall gates opened slowly, and Jamal's eyes widened. The house looked like something out of a fairy tale: bright windows, a garden full of flowers, and a pathway that seemed endless. For a moment, Jamal wondered if it was a mistake. Why would someone like him be here? But then he saw Emily standing on the porch, her hands gently resting on her belly, her smile soft and kind. "Jamal," she called, her voice warm as sunlight, "welcome." Jamal lowered his eyes shyly, unsure of what to say. But Emily walked forward, took his hand, and said, "You saved my life. You saved my baby's life. From now on, you are not just a boy from the street. You are family." Her words made Jamal's throat tighten. No one had called him family in such a long time. Inside, the house was grand, but what struck Jamal most was not the expensive furniture or the sparkling chandeliers. It was the warmth. The walls were filled with pictures of happy moments: weddings, birthdays, vacations. For Jamal, who had only the stars as his ceiling and memories as his treasures, this home felt like another world. Richard sat him down and spoke gently. "Jamal, I made a promise last night. I promised myself that you would never sleep on the streets again. From today, you will live here, with us. We'll make sure you have food, clothes, and most importantly, an education. You deserve a chance to build a future." Jamal's eyes widened in disbelief. "Live here? With you?" "Yes," Richard said firmly. "You'll have your own room, your own bed. And when the baby is born, you'll be like a big brother to him or her." Tears welled in Jamal's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Richard replied softly. "By saving Emily." That night, Jamal was shown to his room. It was simple compared to the rest of the house, but to him, it felt like heaven. A soft bed, a desk with books, clean clothes neatly folded on a chair. He touched the pillow gently, almost afraid it wasn't real. For years, he had slept on hard benches and cold concrete, and now here he was, lying under a warm blanket, feeling safe. He whispered into the darkness, "Mama, I think you're smiling at me right now." The days that followed were like a new beginning. Richard enrolled Jamal in a nearby school. On his first day, Jamal was nervous, afraid the other children would laugh at him for not knowing enough. But Emily reassured him. "Everyone starts somewhere, Jamal. You're brave, and you're smart. Just do your best." At school, Jamal worked harder than anyone else. Every page of his notebook was filled with careful writing. Every question asked by the teacher was met with his eager hand raised. He wanted to learn, not just for himself but for the promise he felt he was keeping to his mother. After school, Jamal often helped around Richard's office, carrying files, making copies, learning how businesses worked. Richard was impressed by the boy's determination. He noticed how Jamal listened carefully, asked questions, and absorbed every detail. In the evenings, Jamal spent time with Emily, who was now very close to giving birth. Sometimes they sat in the nursery, folding tiny clothes or arranging toys. Emily often said, "You'll be such a good influence on my child. One day, he or she will look up to you." Jamal would blush at her words, but deep down, he felt a sense of belonging. For the first time in years, he was not invisible. He was part of something bigger, a family. Then, the day came when Emily went into labor. Richard rushed her to the hospital, his heart racing with both fear and excitement. Jamal waited anxiously in the family room, pacing back and forth. Hours felt like years, until finally, a nurse walked out with a wide smile. "Congratulations," she announced. "It's a healthy baby boy." Richard and Emily cried tears of joy as they held their newborn son. When Jamal was invited into the room, he stood quietly by the door, unsure if he belonged in such a sacred moment. But Emily beckoned him closer. "Come here, Jamal. Meet your little brother." Jamal stepped forward slowly, his eyes filling with wonder as he looked at the tiny bundle in Emily's arms. The baby's small fingers curled tightly, and Jamal felt something shift inside him, a love he had never known before. Richard placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "This is your family now. Never forget that." From that day on, Jamal's life was completely transformed. He was no longer the boy people passed by without noticing. He was part of a home, part of a family, part of a future filled with hope. Every night, before going to bed, Jamal whispered a silent prayer of thanks for Richard, for Emily, for the baby, and for the chance he had been given. And though he missed his mother deeply, he believed that somewhere above, she was watching proudly. Jamal had asked for nothing but opportunity, and in return, he had gained everything: love, belonging, and the chance to build a life worth living. And for Richard, the millionaire who once thought success meant wealth, the true treasure turned out to be the homeless boy who had saved his wife and asked only for a chance. Time passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Jamal was no longer the boy who slept on a park bench under the stars. He was now a young student with books in his bag, meals on the table, and a warm bed waiting for him every night. Yet what meant the most to him was not the comfort or the food, it was the feeling of being seen, loved, and valued. Every morning, he woke up in his room with sunlight peeking through the curtains. On the desk lay his schoolwork neatly arranged, along with a few storybooks Emily had picked out for him. Sometimes, before heading to school, Jamal would walk quietly into the nursery where baby Daniel slept peacefully in his crib. He would lean over, smile softly, and whisper, "Good morning, little brother." The bond between Jamal and the baby grew stronger with each passing day. When Daniel cried, Jamal would gently rock him, humming tunes his mother once sang to him. When Daniel laughed, Jamal felt his heart burst with joy. The baby's tiny hands often gripped Jamal's finger tightly, as if reminding him that he now had someone who looked up to him. Emily often stood by the door, watching with tears in her eyes. She knew that Jamal had not only saved her life that night but had also brought new light into their family. She would say to Richard, "Do you see the way he loves Daniel? It's as if God sent him to us for a reason." Richard agreed every time. For him, success used to mean numbers, contracts, and properties. But now, as he watched Jamal sit at the dining table helping Emily with the baby or reading his schoolbooks with determination, Richard realized that true wealth was not measured by money. It was measured by the people you loved and the lives you touched. At school, Jamal worked harder than anyone else. His teachers quickly noticed his eagerness to learn. Though he had missed years of education, his effort made up for it. When other students grew tired, Jamal kept going, writing page after page, solving problem after problem. Whenever he didn't understand something, he raised his hand without shame, asking questions until he finally got it right. One afternoon, his teacher pulled him aside and said, "Jamal, you are one of the most hard-working students I've ever met. Do you know what makes you special? It's not just your brain, it's your heart. You never give up." Those words stayed with him. They reminded him of his mother's last advice, never give up. Richard often took Jamal with him to his office on weekends. At first, Jamal just helped with simple tasks like organizing papers or carrying files. But soon, Richard noticed that the boy was curious about how things worked. Jamal would stand quietly in the corner during meetings, listening carefully, absorbing every word. Afterward, he would ask thoughtful questions. Why do companies work together? How do you make sure workers are treated fairly? What happens if people don't keep their promises in business? Richard was amazed. This boy who once had nothing was now dreaming big, not for riches, but for the knowledge to build a life of dignity. At home, Jamal continued to show his gentle nature. One evening, the family sat together for dinner. The table was full of delicious food: roast chicken, fresh vegetables, bread, and fruit. Jamal paused for a moment before eating, silently remembering the nights when he had gone to bed hungry. When Richard noticed, he placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You never have to worry about going hungry again," Richard said softly. "This is your home. As long as we are here, you will always have a place at this table." Tears stung Jamal's eyes, and he whispered, "Thank you." As weeks turned into months, the story of the homeless boy who had saved a millionaire's wife began to spread quietly in the community. People admired Jamal not only for his courage that night but also for his humility afterward. Many said, he didn't ask for money. He asked for a future. His story inspired others to look at those less fortunate with new eyes, realizing that sometimes all a person needs is an opportunity. One Sunday, after church, an elderly woman approached Jamal. She smiled and said, "Young man, I heard about what you did. Your heart is pure. Keep walking on this path, and one day, you will change the world." Jamal blushed, unsure how to respond, but inside, her words planted another seed of hope. Emily, meanwhile, often wrote in her journal about the changes in their home. She wrote about Jamal's kindness, how he tucked Daniel in at night, how he never complained, and how he always offered to help. She wrote about Richard, too, how her husband had softened, how his priorities had shifted, how the boy had taught him to see life differently. One night, Emily showed Richard her journal and said, "You know, Jamal is not just a boy we helped. He is a blessing we received." Richard nodded, his eyes misty. "Yes," he whispered. "He saved you, Emily. He gave me my family back. And in return, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure he has one too." Jamal, unaware of these conversations, continued to live simply, guided by gratitude. He still wore his mother's scarf around his neck every day. To him, it was more than fabric. It was a reminder of where he had come from and the promise he had made to live a life his mother would be proud of. One evening, after finishing his homework, Jamal stepped outside into the garden. The stars sparkled above, just as they had on the nights when he lay on park benches. He whispered into the cool night air, "Mama, I hope you can see me now. I kept your words. I didn't give up. And now, I have a family again." He closed his eyes and smiled, feeling peace wash over him. The Collins family had found in Jamal a son they never expected, and Jamal had found in them the family he had always longed for. Their lives had been tied together by chance, but they remained bound by love and gratitude. And so, the homeless boy who once had nothing but hope grew into a young man with everything that truly mattered, a family, a future, and a heart full of kindness. In the end, Richard often said to his friends, "Wealth is not about money. It's about the lives you touch." A boy with nothing taught me that lesson. And because of him, I am the richest man alive. And Jamal, whenever asked about his story, would simply smile and say, "I only wanted a chance. And that chance became the greatest gift of my life."